Get up there. Thank you. Last night we looked at a parable Do you remember last night? Okay. Wasn't too rough. We looked at a parable last night, Luke chapter 16, right? And I looked at verses 1 through 4. If you don't remember, or remember, I just asked you to listen. Don't have to turn to it in the Bible. I asked, if you want to read it later. I hope you did, but I'm going to pick up on this idea of seeing our marriages through two lenses. One lens is this parable, the parable of the dishonest manager. And then the second lens is the soul model. But let me finish this parable. Let me start from the beginning, and I'm going to read it. It's 13 verses. I didn't read all 13 last night, but I'm going to today. Luke chapter 16. He also said to the disciples, there was a rich man who had a manager, and charges were brought to him that this man was wasting his possessions. And he called him and said to him, what is this that I hear about you? Turn in the account of your management, for you can no longer be manager. And the manager said to himself, what shall I do, since my master is taking the management away from me? I am not strong enough to dig, and I am ashamed to beg. I have decided what to do, so that when I am removed from management, people may receive me into their houses. So summoning his master's debtors one by one, he said to the first, how much do you owe my master? He said, 100 measures of oil. He said to him, take your bill and sit down quickly and write 50. Then he said to another, and how much do you owe? He said, 100 measures of wheat. He said to him, take your bill and write 80. The master commended the dishonest manager for his shrewdness. For the sons of this world are more shrewd in dealing with their own generation than the sons of light. And I tell you, make friends for yourself by means of unrighteous wealth, so that when it fails, they may receive you into the eternal dwellings. One who is faithful in a very little is also faithful in much, and one who is dishonest in a very little is also dishonest in much. If then you have not been faithful in the unrighteous wealth, who will entrust to you the true riches? And if you have not been faithful in that which is another's, who will give you that which is your own? No servant can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and money. The question that I posed and what I'm tried to answer partly last night in verses 1 through 4 is, in the marriage context, are our priorities aligned with God's? Remember the note I had on parables. Parables, there is a mirror showing a real-life circumstance. There is a teacher explaining what the mirror is showing, right? That's what Jesus is doing. It's a common teaching tool. And who is the owner? Who's the master? God. In all the parables, that's very consistent. And who are the managers? That's us, his followers, right? Did you pick up on something that I read? I hope you did. I'm gonna point two things out. Something started this problem, right? That this manager was called to account. Something started the problem. And remember, I talked about God will always settle accounts, right? Did you pick up what it was? Charges were brought to him that this man was wasting his possessions. But then, in verse 13, you cannot serve God and money. Possessions is a little broader than money, isn't it? Okay, so Jesus uses money as an application tool. You've probably heard this verse preached about tithing. I would never use this parable to preach about tithing, because tithing is in Malachi. It's very explicit. This is about the place of the heart, right? And we talked yesterday about a manager as us. If we are the managers, we are given a lot more than just money to manage. in reference in the context of our marriage. So I want to kind of go on with that. And I hope you picked up on the second point I'm going to talk about. And this is what Jesus talks about, the shrewdness. Did you hear when I read it? He says, how much do you owe? 100 measures. Take your bill and sit and write 50. Then he said, how much do you owe? 100 measures of wheat. He said to him, take your bill and write 80. And we're prone to think, because we think like today, right, where we're paying bills, that we're going to shortchange the bank. That's our modern thinking. Well, that wasn't the context. Here's how it worked. An owner had managers. A manager would go out, think a sharecropper, right? They're farming on the owner's land. Just one example. And they get 100, whatever it is, of wheat. Or they get 80, whatever, of wheat. Guess who's skimming off the top? That's how it worked. This was a common practice in Jesus' time. So, did you pick up what he said? I'm too weak. What did he say? He said, I'm not strong enough to dig, and I'm ashamed to beg. I have decided what to do. He has a wonderful idea. That's great when we create our own ideas, right? And not God's. I've decided what to do so that when I'm removed from management, people may receive me into their houses. What in the world is he talking about? Well, here's what he's talking about. What's he giving up when he goes and collects? He's giving up his skim. He's giving up his entitled share. That's why he says, take your bill and write 80. Take your bill and write 50. He's going to pay back the owner the bottom line. The owner is going to get everything. Do you see where Jesus is going with the parable? God's going to get it all. Right? This man, this dishonest manager, gave up what he had taken as an entitlement. In the context of our marriage, are we willing to give up things that cost us? Are we willing to give up things that maybe cause us not to grow closer together as husband and wife? I don't like to ask a lot of questions when I preach, but I did on that one. Let me put it to you this way. If our priorities are aligned with God's, we have to be willing to give up what we think we're entitled to, if we're going to be a proper steward and manager of what God gives us. That's what Jesus is saying here. And he says at the end of that, make friends for yourselves by means of unrighteous wealth. Is he being cheeky? I don't know. What you see in the original language is friends most likely means the poor, the disenfranchised, those that are inheriting the kingdom of heaven. If you've heard Mel's sermons this week on the Beatitudes, that is kind of that's the friends, right? And he says, and dishonesty in this text is what? Giving up what you think you're entitled to and using it to make friends. Do you see that? Do you see how the parable works out that way? But let me pick up the last part, because I want to make sure we have enough time tonight. He goes on and talks about being faithful in very little. And he goes on and he talks about no servant can serve two masters. How many of you that grew up in the church have heard that your whole life? Right? And who can give me the King James Version? I love the King James Version, but we don't use it anymore. Who can give it to me? You cannot serve God and mammon, right? That's such a hard word. That's like a punch in the face, you know? But ESV translates it money. But from this parable, Jesus is not necessarily talking about money. Money is the application that he is using. because that's what the dishonest manager is doing, right? It's all about money. But if we are managers of what God gives us, possessions, right? It's more than money, isn't it? Let me make the application a little clearer to you. The last verse. He will be devoted to the one and desire the other. And despise the other. I'm sorry. You cannot serve God and your wife. You cannot serve God and your career. You cannot serve God and your children. You cannot serve God and your family. You cannot serve God and your mom. You cannot serve God and your mother-in-law. Do you see what Jesus is calling for? It is so radical. That's why we talked about the soul model. Can you put that up, Jeremiah? Because Jesus is talking about the will, isn't he? Did you hear it in the lyrics? He said something in there about serving your doubts. Did you hear that? It was in one of the first lines. Or worshiping your doubts. I think that's what they said. What can come right here? Can we worship our doubts? Absolutely. Can we worship money? Absolutely. Can we worship our wife? Can we worship our husband? Had a neighbor come over and talk to me about some family issues today before I got here. And that's what it was. When your husband becomes your God, it's probably going to fail you. Can we worship our children? Everybody knows that. Remember last night I talked about your crazy neighbor that lives in Fallbrook, right? Can we worship fill in the blank? Fill it. That's what Jesus is talking about. That we are stewards. Seeing our marriage through that lens, are our priorities aligned with God's? Because the truth is, if we believe what Jesus is saying in this parable, our priorities must be aligned with God's. Unless you want to stand on your own defense when God calls accounts, when he settles accounts. They must be. That's our marriage in this context. But we looked at this, didn't we? We looked at this, and if you weren't with us last night, I asked, do you have a soul? Most people say yes. What's the soul made up of? Most people go, I don't know, or look at me with a blank stare. Or I ask, who are you? If someone asked who you are, what would you say? And we're often tempted to tell people what our jobs are. Well, no, that's your job. That's not who you are. This is who you are. And when we say, if you can answer me for a review, right? When we bear the image of God, what are we bearing? So this is John. This is Jesus talking to the woman at the well, right? And he says, God is, you got a homework assignment now. God is spirit, and those who worship him will worship him in spirit and in truth. That's how we know God does not bear physical form, because Jesus told us. So we read many ways, we bear the image of God. So what does that mean? Communicable attributes, right? Things that God shares with us, which are, in this model, the will. God has a will. He wanted to create you, so he did, right? God has emotions. If you even glance at the Bible, you will see that everywhere, especially the Psalms. And God has a mind, rationale, right? Thinking. That's how we bear God's image. Now, this is the second lens I've asked for you to look and see your marriage through as we talk about this tonight. I hope that you will take this with you past tonight and begin to see the things that I think and feel and the things that I do. Where do they fit in this? Is it my will? God expects that we reflect. It is something that separates us from animals. I know there's a lot of dog lovers in here. I have no compassion for dogs or cats. Ask my wife. I like dogs, but I'm not going to put an adopt a pet sticker on the back of my car in a nation that's killed 40 million babies since 1973. But I hope you take this with you and you start running things through this grid, because this is where God meets us if we reflect on what's going on in our lives. Because, ladies and gentlemen, and I hope you hear it, this is free, you don't have to pay for this tonight. This is my last kind of segue into what we're going to do tonight. Humanism, right? Secular humanism. It's its own religion, and I hope you know it. And what do we hear? If we just educate people, if we can just teach people, if we can just teach people, fill in the blank, if we can just teach people to be good, if we can just teach people not to rape women, if we can just teach people not to drink and drive, if we can just teach them, we have been taught to death in this country. If you grow up like me, going to public school, you were taught all these things. And then if you're like me that serves as a chaplain in the military, and everybody looks and goes, chaps, why do people do this stuff? We told them what not to do. We even gave them a direct order. Because, ladies and gentlemen, we're slaves to passion more than intellect. We are slaves to passion. And we talked about last night who changes our passions, who changes our will. The Holy Spirit changes our will. It's the only way. We cannot educate our way to change our will in reference to our passions. Can we do it with other things, like the right car to buy or the right house to buy? Maybe, absolutely. I mean, you take a preponderance of the evidence, and if somebody tells you the house has a bad foundation, probably you don't want to buy it. That's an educated mind, right? But not in reference to the human condition. And in context of our marriage, this is what we have to grasp onto, is that how we treat each other, if we desire change, or if someone tells us we need to change, where does change take place? It takes place in the will. And who changes the will? The Holy Spirit. Do you see how it works? So I hate to tell you, but there are no 7 steps to a happier marriage. There are no 7 steps to marriage freedom. If anyone ever tells you that or tries to sell you on that, you need to get up and walk away. Because that's not what the Bible says. The Bible says who we worship is the most important, and change happens here. That's what it's talking about. We're either going to be a slave to God, or we're going to be a slave to something else. That's what it all comes down to. But let's move forward. Because we talked really, and I think you walked away maybe with a different or maybe a new way to talk about things. Jeremiah printed it out for you. Did anyone practice talking about these 4 emotions any more than last night? I know we got out here a little later and you might have picked up your kids, and little Matthias, my son, was about to fall asleep at the table, eating his cereal last night. Did anyone practice this? You did? Any thoughts? It's awkward. Did it get a little bit easier as you went along? Yes, good stuff. That's good stuff. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you can hear each other, can't you? You can hear each other. Yeah. Yeah. If you want to know each other, not what kind of ice cream you like, that's how you really know each other, isn't it? Anybody else practice this? Yeah? If you any thoughts? You don't have to have any, I'm just asking. Mm, yeah. Not having rebuttal is very difficult. Yeah, very difficult. Especially if that's a pattern for us, right? And it can be. We're going to move on, and I want to save some time to practice this once more at the end of the night because this one's crucial. And I hope you see in the soul model how we can confide in each other in just one aspect of our lives, right? One aspect, our emotions, which are God given. We should never be ashamed of them. They're God given, right? And I had, I just want to make a side note on this, and it came from a conversation earlier with a neighbor that always walks in my house, and I'm like, I don't like other women in my house, but we live in a military base, and it's just really weird. And anyway, but um, I'm trying not to trail off. And she talked about guilt and shame. And I just want to give you some encouragement. When Jesus talked about the dishonest manager, did the owner ever guilt him into settling accounts? Did he ever shame him? Not really. He says he's direct, isn't he? He just says, go and settle accounts. You're done. He doesn't do anything attributive. He doesn't use guilt and shame to do it. God never uses guilt and shame. If you struggle with the definition of those terms, guilt comes from what we do, shame comes from who we think we are. Shame is looking in the mirror. Guilt is remembering our actions. Sometimes that's because, as Paul said, we have the law written on our hearts. There's no such thing, I don't really believe there's such thing as false guilt. I think guilt is guilt. It has the same effect, right? But I just want to give you some encouragement in that as we have talked about emotions. Guilt and shame are not emotions. I just gave you the definition of what they are. We can have emotions from them, but they are not emotions in and of themselves. Now, let's move on. Because tonight I want to talk about, and I want to give you a tool to use in how we talk when we have conflict. I love conflict. I just dwell in it. Ask my wife. Well, I don't know about love. I don't shy away from it. In the context of where I minister, it's very normal. Conflict is just part of waking up in the morning. And but this is what this is about. How do we talk in these things? I want to go through, now this comes from a material called Prep, and we use it on the base. I think this is really good for this audience. Prep, it's interesting where it comes from. I can give you a lot of history. Marriage and family therapy practice up in Colorado. And they created a secular version from all their wisdom in seeing couples. But people in the practice, they're all Christians. It's very interesting. So I want to give you, I want you to think about the context in your marriage when you have conflict. And there are what has been identified as 4 communication danger signs. So what does that mean? It doesn't mean your marriage is over if these show up. It just means that it's very difficult to grow if these are a part of a pattern and how you discuss things, how you manage conflict in marriage. So if you can go to that slide, you'll see it. Here they are. invalidation, escalation, withdrawal, and negative interpretation. We're going to watch a video clip tonight. These are actual couples that signed waivers to be filmed in their counseling sessions. And we're going to see these pop up. And the video that we're going to watch, the clip, and I've used this many times. I use it on weekend retreats. It's usually our opener, but I took you straight to the emotional language because that's how much I believe in you all. But we're going to go through each one of these, and we're going to watch the clip, and then we're going to practice this technique. But let me go through these, because these are really important. Because remember, in the soul model, I talked about soul wounds, right? And we all have a resume of soul wounds. Guess where we learned these? Anybody want to give me a guess? Probably that's where we saw them growing up. We probably saw these growing up, and we bring them. I would not even say what a psychologist might say is subconscious. We just bring them. We just bring it into marriage. And we say, I'm going to win this one, or I'll get you later. Or we learn it on the playground. I'm watching my children grow up. We learn it as we deal with other people. We learn it in competition. We learn it, or we just do this because we want to do it. Can't ever forget about the will, right? So let's take a look at it. Invalidation. What does that sound like when you hear that word? If we invalidate someone. You can go to the next slide. Let's look at the definition. Putting down the thoughts, the opinions, or the character of the other. I hope someone, no matter what age you are, has advised you that you don't watch the news as a couple. I hope someone has told you that. There's probably not much good that can come of that. Putting down the thoughts, opinions, or character of the other. How do we put down, remember your crazy neighbor in Fallbrook or your crazy rich neighbor in Bonsall? How do we put down, how have you heard them put down the thoughts, opinions of their husband or wife? Give me a quote. That's what I'm looking for. Are you kidding me? That's a good one. That's ridiculous. All right, I'm going to give you permission because we're trying to be real here, and Jeremiah is recording this. But I'm a pastor and I work in this context. If you're quoting, you can use swear words. Okay? Because that's real life. I hate to tell you. I know you know that, but we often don't talk like that. So, how do we put down the opinions of someone else? That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. What the hell is wrong with you? Yeah. How do we put down, the character? How do we put down the character of our husband or wife? How could you think that? You're crazy. They might be. You born yesterday? You're a liar. You're a pig. You're an, proper English language, you're an idiot. Here's a common one. That's so stupid. Man, where did we learn that? Right there. And we've been saying it our whole lives. And the Apostle Paul says in 1 Corinthians 13, when he's talking about love, when I was a child, I thought like a child, I spoke like a child. When I became a man, I put childish ways behind me. That is in his definition of love. But we still say that stuff. Withdrawal. Let's look at the next one. This is serious escalation. This is serious stuff, guys. And when they pop up and when they're in our patterns of conflict and communication, they're very dangerous to our marriage. Escalation. Oh, That's where your inner lawyer comes out, right? Anybody ever here read Paul Tripp? Paul Tripp's awesome. If you've never read his stuff, and he talks about this a lot. His book has been retitled. Nitsa and I went through his study, and his book has been retitled again. Now it's called Marriage. What it was before was What Did You Expect? That's an incredible book if you want to read it. And he is talking about the soul model, and he is talking. What does he say, sweetheart? He says, "I had a tree in my backyard, and I wanted it to bear fruit, so I bought a bunch of apples at the store, and I went out and hammered it onto the tree." And he says that's what we're like in marriage. We don't change the roots. We don't change what's inside. We can't make it do something, right? Escalation. That's the inner lawyer. Someone says something and we talk a little louder. And we talk a little loud. So the other person talks a little louder. Or the hands start moving. You know the hands? Or the dishes start flying. Or someone throws something on the ground. Do you ever win an argument? You don't ever win an argument. Somebody just gives up. Or they put it in their ammo belt for later. Withdrawal. Here's a bad one. We need to talk about our finances. I got to go. We need to talk about what happened with our kids at school today. I'm busy right now. Can we talk about that later? What's a common way we withdraw? Just give me, I know you got it. I usually have my prop. To silent treatment, that's a very common way. Yep. Oh, you got it. You're on the same page. Your phone, because you're so important. You're all so important. You're all number one, like great Americans. You're just number one. And you get a text and you got to answer it right then, don't you? You're in a good conversation, and things are going well, and you're making some headway, and then that phone goes off. Man. Withdrawal. And then the last one, negative interpretation. Negative interpretation is when you're, you've been out all day, or, maybe it's the morning, and you park in front of Starbucks and you say, "Sweetheart, go in there and get me a cup of coffee." And somebody comes out with something that you've never drank in your entire life. And you go, "You're just doing that to irritate me. You're doing that because we talked about this same thing last week." That's negative interpretation. Because what are you doing? You are making an assumption that you know what that person is thinking. Now, based on the soul model, can you know what each other thinks? Not unless you verbalize it. Negative interpretation is dangerous. But let's watch this video clip about this technique, and then we're going to practice it. So Jeremiah is going to pull it up for us, and I'm going to step away and we'll practice this. Take a look at it.
Communicating with our partner about tough topics can be difficult, and often it doesn't go the way we want it to. Let's watch a couple, James and Larios, talking in a way that you'll recognize contains many of the communication danger signs.
Cynical. You're being completely cynical.
Well, then tell me what you want me to do.
No, I'm just saying that I want...
Because all I said is I just
No,
want
I'm
you
just
to
saying if
tell
you're going to
me.
give me space. Maybe
I
go...
do
We
give
have
you
two
space.
bedrooms. Go in the other bedroom. Why are you trying to shave at 10
Where do
o'clock
you
at
think
night?
that I went? I shaved in the bathroom, I took a
At 10
bath,
o'clock
and
at
then I
night.
went in the other
Why
bedroom.
couldn't you do that in the morning?
Because remember, I didn't come back and sleep with you. I stayed in the other bedroom.
Now we got to talk about that.
No, I'm just telling you what I did.
So? What does that got to do with anything?
What it has to do with is
No,
that
you didn't
if I-
come back and sleep with me because you were pissed off because I wanted to have
Now
all
you see
night.
that right there?
What?
You asked me a question, I try to answer it, and then
Wait,
you,
what's the question?
And then, well, obviously, if you would have let me finish saying what I had to say, you probably would have heard it the first time.
What was the question?
All I'm saying is...
No, what was the question?
See, you do it. Look,
But you
can't...
cut me off and you said I didn't... What was the question?
Okay, I'll tell you what.
Okay.
You talk, I'll sit here, and I'll just listen.
Really?
Yes.
That's not how we do things.
Well,
no, I just want to know what the question is because I got lost.
Well, we must have got lost a lot because I didn't try to tell you 3 times, and each time you didn't cut me off like boom, 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 boom.
Wait, okay, let's back up. We were talking about you just coming in. That's all.
We've all been there with our partner, where we keep talking and talking and talking and nothing ever changes. That's how we know it's time to try something different. We've come up with a method of communication that has been proven to help conversations be more productive. This method is called the speaker-listener technique. To see the difference it can make in communication, let's watch James and Larios try the same conversation after learning the technique.
So, when you don't listen, or when you cut me off while I'm talking, I know that you may not intentionally be trying to make me feel this way, but I do feel disrespected when you do that. So it sends me into I wouldn't say a rage, but it makes me even try harder to get my point across. You understand what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. So what I hear you saying is when I cut you off or I'm not listening, it makes you feel disrespected and more reactive. Is that correct? Okay.
Correct.
All right. When we argue, I just want to feel like you are actually listening to me and not feel like I'm attacking you. Sometimes the conversation or the topic can be very uncomfortable. So make sure, I just want you to hear me out to the end. So I'll try to be more brief when I talk, but don't make assumptions because it makes me feel like on the defense, like I have to get everything out and then I feel, upset.
So you want to make sure that I give you the proper time to get everything out you have to get out. Not jump to conclusions thinking you're thinking this or you're feeling this way and just letting this just flow naturally.
Right, exactly.
All right.
Yeah.
With the technique, James is able to share why he reacts to Larios the way he does, and Larios is able to share how hurt she is by his reactions. The speaker-listener technique provided them with structure so that they were able to have a more productive conversation. Now that we've seen the speaker-listener technique in action and what a difference it can make, it's your turn to learn it so you can begin communicating more effectively with your partner. In order to help couples stay on track with the technique, we've come up with a tool that we call the floor. Here's how it works. With the speaker-listener technique, there are 2 roles, a speaker and a listener, and both have to participate. Both the speaker and the listener have some simple rules to follow. Let's start with the rules for the speaker. The first rule is to speak for yourself. Don't mind read. Mind reading is when you tell someone what they are thinking, wanting, or feeling. No one appreciates being told how they feel or what they really think, so remembering to speak for yourself by using the speaker-listener technique is a healthier and more productive communication habit to form. Here's an example of what mind reading looks like. In this clip, Dr. Howard Markman is helping Christina correct her mind reading statement when it comes to a discussion about having children.
You still do, for sure, want to have children.
Seems to you, or as you recall.
Yeah.
So it's really important to kind of speak for yourself, not for the other person.
Okay.
The second rule for the speaker in the speaker-listener technique is to keep statements brief. Don't go on and on. When someone goes on and on in a conversation, the listener can become frustrated by too many thoughts all at once. Here's an example of a speaker going on too long. In this clip, you'll see how frustrated Joni, the listener, gets.
Joni, I really understand how important family is to you, and that you're thousands of miles away from your family all across the United States. We're really looking forward to getting as many of them as we can to Pennsylvania, and I completely understand you wanting to see them as much as you possibly can. But the financial side of it, we really would be saving a ton of money and saving a ton of time if we if we would go about it that way. And you also...
Why don't you pause for a minute and give Joni a chance to paraphrase,
yeah,
okay?
Sure.
So you can keep the card
Okay.
while she's the listener, but just paraphrase what you've heard so far.
Okay. I have to think about what all you said, because you said quite a bit for me to paraphrase.
You can see how easy it is for the listener to get frustrated by a speaker bringing up too many subjects all at once. This brings us to our last rule for the speaker. The speaker should stop periodically to give the listener the chance to paraphrase. So you can see paraphrasing in action. Let's watch Jess and Lee. You can see Jess wants to go on, but she stops herself to let Lee have a chance to paraphrase.
I feel frustrated because I sometimes think that you have too high of expectations for what the kids should and should not be doing, and then you feel like they're not listening to you because they're unable to meet those expectations. And yeah.
So what I think you said was, I have too high expectations for the kids, and by trying to hold them to those high expectations, it's frustrating me and making me upset.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the 3 rules that the speaker should follow to help keep the conversation respectful and productive. Now let's talk about the rules for the listener. The first rule for the listener is to paraphrase. Paraphrasing is when you tell the speaker what you heard them say using your own words. So that you can see paraphrasing in action, here's an example of Jenna and David using this powerful communication habit. Here, they're discussing David's concern that it's dangerous to argue while driving.
And I feel like, when I'm driving, I have ADHD, so anything catches my attention. So if I'm not paying good enough attention to the road, I could get in an accident and then we get into more problems.
Well, what I understood is that for our safety, I should let you concentrate on the road. And because of your ADHD, it's best that I don't start yelling at you.
Yeah.
The final rule for the listener is to focus on the speaker's message. Don't rebut. Rebutting happens when we're so focused on our own reaction to the speaker that we're no longer seeking to understand the message. This can be a tough rule to follow because most of us are pretty eager to have our say. Basically, you put aside your own thoughts for the moment and focus 100% on what the speaker is saying. Here's a quick example. You'll see here that Joni really wants to rebut with her own message, but stops herself from doing so.
So that we can see as many families as possible and stay underneath our budget. If we opened up the invitation list a little bit further for like cousins and things like that of yours that are within driving distance so that they could possibly drive to the wedding and you can see them there.
I hear that you're wanting to expand the wedding list, but it's really not, no, I shouldn't do that.
Yeah, you should.
Yeah.
Is that a good paraphrase? I hear that you're wanting to expand the wedding list?
I am wanting to expand the wedding list.
So that's all I'm going to say, because I'm not happy about that, but that's okay.
Okay, so let's edit that out until you have the floor and you're the speaker.
Okay.
With the speaker-listener technique, the listener needs to put aside his or her own thoughts in order to stay focused on what the speaker is saying. For this to work, the listener doesn't need to agree with what the speaker is saying. He or she just needs to show that the speaker's message was understood. Here are the rules for both of you to keep in mind. First, the speaker has the floor. It's helpful for the speaker to actually hold the floor card, not only as a reminder of the rules, but also to make it clear that it's the speaker's message that's in play. In fact, you can grab any object to signify who has the floor. The person without the floor, then, is the listener. The second rule is that the speaker holds onto the floor card even while the listener paraphrases. And the last rule is to share the floor. Sometimes it's hard to share the floor when there's a lot of disagreement, but that's when sharing the floor becomes most important. The floor card should be passed back and forth several times, giving both of you a chance to listen and be heard. This way, you're acting as a team to communicate well, helping one another be the best speakers and listeners you can be. One other suggestion we make is that you ban problem solving when trying to communicate well about an issue. Seek first to understand. Work on solutions later. Now let's put all the rules together and watch a couple, Jared and Christiana, have a productive speaker-listener conversation. Let's listen to how well they manage this discussion about how tough it is for them to make time to connect as a couple. What you'll see here are highlights of a longer discussion they had, but note how well the technique works for them.
We haven't gone on a date for a long time, and when we did a while back, I feel like not even then. We didn't really reconnect, and we always ended up fighting.
So it's been a long time since we went on a date, and the last time we did go on a date, you didn't feel like we connected very well.
Yeah. It saddens me because I do love you, and I just don't even know how to connect with you.
You're sad because you love me and you want to connect with me, but you don't know a good way to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to connect with you too. And I feel like when we do get time to be together, that there's so much pressure for us to have a good time that it gets ruined.
The pressure of us going out, ruins any ability to have a good time.
Yeah, and I feel like expectations, because whether it's a date or just any time space that we have together, there's high expectations from you because you want it to be amazing, which I do too, and I feel like I struggle meeting your expectations.
Okay. I have high expectations of what a date should look like, and then when they're not met, it kind of messes things up. Okay. I may have too high expectations. And I'm sorry.
You agree that you have high expectations, and you're sorry that you have high expectations.
Yeah. I want us to have fun. But you get very stingy about things, and that is frustrating for me.
I want to paraphrase that for you, but can you tell me more? What do you mean by stingy?
Like, I want to have fun, and you plan this date, but then you're like, no, we can't do that. I feel like you often say, no, we can't do that, unless it's your idea. If I have an idea, it's...
So you want to have fun on a date, and if it's my idea, I'm usually okay with it, but if it's your idea, a lot of times I say we can't do that for one reason or the other.
Yeah. And not think about, like, I don't want to think about money. Because when we did date, you spent so much money on me.
When we used to date before we were married, I spent a lot more money, and I didn't seem to care as much as I did.
Yeah.
Cool. I do think more about money now than when we were dating before, because we have a smaller budget and 4 kids to think about. I want to make sure that we have enough money for the whole month and not just on the date.
Yeah. May I?
We have to clarify.
Oh, so sorry. You want to make sure we're provided for, not just in a moment, but for the whole picture. Okay.
Yeah. I know you want it.
The technique helped them talk openly with a lot of emotional safety for a conversation that could otherwise get off track. And while the original topic began with finding time to connect and keeping conflict out of that time, repeatedly passing the floor gave both of them the opportunity to speak their minds, raise different aspects of the issue, and genuinely hear one another's perspective on why connecting has become difficult. Also, take note of something they did that shows a lot of skill. At one point, Jared asked Christiana to clarify what she meant by stingy. While the listener should focus on paraphrasing what the speaker says, it is fine for the listener to ask a genuine listening question, like he did, designed to better understand the speaker's point. Here's the thing. The speaker-listener technique provides structure so that both people have a voice, both people feel heard, and they can talk as a team.
Two points, and then we're going to practice. First, can you see with all these couples how it's so real? How they probably were at home and this was like screaming? Can you see it? Yeah. And they came in and they asked for help. And we're not told in the process of their therapist working with them where they are, especially that last couple. Now, that last couple to me is my favorite, and the first couple is too, because they're so realistic. And the last couple to me looks like a lot of that was probably just held in, right? Because she said, it saddens me. And that is, it just feels like that stuff's just held back. And I love how you guys laugh because we use this at our weekend retreats, and it always gets a giggle on the budget one. That always. But it's so real, right? What if that were you? Could people laugh at what you're talking about? Because it's so real. That's all of us. But we get caught in the emotions, don't we? And here's the word that we use. It's a very simple word. We all know it, and we all use it. And when we use it, it backs someone into a corner. And when there's 2 responses when you're backed into a corner, you're going to fight your way out or you're going to give up. And you might be giving up out of strategy so you can come back and fight later. It's the word you. Second person singular in the English language. You. You know what you're doing when you say you? You're pointing the finger. It's verbally pointing the finger. You are. You think. No, 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 no. That's not how adults talk, ladies and gentlemen. I feel that we are not on the same page. That's how an adult talks. I think that I don't think I can understand something that you're saying. That's how an adult talks. No more yous. That's accusatory. It backs each other into a corner in marriage. Because guess what? You've already been vulnerable with each other. You know you're vulnerable when you take your clothes off and you sleep together, right? That's called vulnerability. That's physical vulnerability. And that's why that word hurts. It scares us. Let's talk like adults. But I want to practice this. So last night, I talked to you about talking to each other in a respectful and dignified manner. And remember what my rules were for talking to each other? There were just two. You turn and face each other, right? Shoulders square, and you make eye contact. Because remember, I gave the example of try talking to your boss like you talk to your wife or husband and see how it works out for you. And I challenged you on that, so come and tell me later if you do that. So I want you to do that now. Turn and face each other. And Jeremiah's put up the rules here. They said you can use any, and I can get this card for you, but they said that you can use any object. I wouldn't say any object. You can't use a knife or a gun. Or my wife said keys. Keys are not a good idea. Any safe object, right? And we're going to have some ambient music going so people can't hear your conversation. Now, here's how I want you to practice this. Because that whole no rebuttal thing came up again, didn't it? That whole no rebuttal, did that come up again? We saw that again. So it's starting to become a theme now, right? It's not healthy. So I want you to pick, for the first 5 minutes, I want you to pick a trivial topic. This is a trivial topic. I think Coke is a better product than Pepsi. I think Macs are better than PCs. I think vacationing in the mountains is better than vacationing at the beach. That is a trivial topic. And that's how I want you to, now it can be anything for you. I think dogs make better pets than cats. That can cause a response sometimes, but it can be anything. So let's practice this. Now remember, try to stick to the technique the best you can. Who is going to be the speaker first? Show me your hands. Someone has to be the speaker first. Speaker first? Okay. We're going to switch. All right, so let's practice. I'm good. Probably need. You just turn the volume up on the music.
Put your hope in Christ alone, as the deep longs for the one. So my soul longs to be home. Come now,
whatever works for you, you can. It's important to stay on the topic to paraphrase. But once you switch speaker listener, you can kind of move on. Yeah.
Let your goodness like a feather bind my broken heart. In the night, your song is with me. Day by day, you hold me fast. Oh, my soul, hope in Jesus.
Oh, thanks, man. Appreciate that. I have a.
breakers crash and bring me falling to my knees. It goes on and on and on. Where is my God? My salvation is in you and you alone. Deep calls to deep, waves of unbelief. Breakers crash and bring me falling to my knees. It goes on and on and on. Where's my God? My salvation is in living water. What's in my heart to bless your name? Streams of trouble never ceasing. Call for song. Come now, living water. Tune my heart to bless your name. Streams of trouble never ceasing. Call for song.
See, I listen. I listen to my wife.
Call for song. Loudest praise.
Okay, I want to come to a hard stop. I want to get your thoughts on this technique. By the way, that's the YouTube version. You can go back and watch it a million times if you want. And we didn't go over, I've got a slide on paraphrasing. You're more than welcome to any of the slides that we have this weekend. And I hope you picked up on paraphrasing. So what I hear you saying, it sounds to me like what I think I heard you say was, that's paraphrasing, right? So what are your thoughts? Again, a tool for your toolbox. I won't put you on the spot, but is that a pattern in your communication? So and here's why I say that. You're not the only one. This is common. That's why this tool is what it is. Yeah. Thank you for saying that. Anyone else have that same experience? Or go ahead. Sure. Yeah. That's a time thing. That's all that is. Yeah, you're adults. You can talk about whatever you want. Yeah. Yeah. It's not your turn. Dramatic. Wow. The Hulk hands? Foam Hulk hands? Any other thoughts on this? And in the soul model, what aspect of you in that grid of who you are is that running through when you have to do that? Will, you're desiring to do it. You're desiring for her to be heard, right? What's the next one? Because you're not a parrot. You're not like a pirate parrot, right? You're using your mind. And then probably another one, you're using your emotions. Wow. Where have we read that someone does that with us? See how God does that with us when we read the word? It's all over it, man. That's our model for marriage. That's it. I want us to, for 1-2 minutes, this is why I wanted a hard stop, because I want you to feel the difference between speaker-listener technique, where you're not rebutting and you're paraphrasing and you're working to hear each other. I want us to go back for just a couple minutes to practice what we did last night on emotional language. Remember, that's a confiding exercise. So here it is. And you guys have the question. We'll just go for time and I'll give it to you guys. So there's one of,
Oh, come behold the works of God, the nations at his feet. He breaks the bow and bends the spear and tells the wars to cease. Almighty One of Israel, you are on our side. We walk by faith in God who burns the chariots with fire. Lord of hosts, you lead us with us in the fire, with us as a shelter, with us in the storm. You will lead us through the fiercest battle. Oh, where else would we go but with the Lord of hosts? Fierce and great, you lift your voice to speak. The earth it bows and all the mountains move into the sea.
all right, this was a hard shift. Stop for a minute. Confiding exercise, there is no paraphrasing. Remember, it's emotional language. You see the difference? You paraphrase in conflict. So what I hear you saying is, that's way you're making sure you're heard. Each other is heard. When you want to do confiding, I feel this way. Did you hear some of it? They were using it in speaker-listener technique. And then they paraphrased what they felt. But that was in conflict. Confiding is not in conflict. Right? This is going through your 4 emotions. Mad, glad, sad, and afraid. That's a human being, right? We all have 4. So no paraphrasing, no rebuttal. Need 5 minutes again.
The oceans roar, you are the Lord of all, the one who calms the wind and waves and makes my heart be still. Though the earth gives way, the mountains move into the sea, the nations rage, I know my God is in control. The oceans roar, you are the Lord of all, the one who calms the wind and waves and makes my heart be still. Though the earth gives way, the mountains move into the sea, the nations rage, I know my God is in control.
Ending on a positive note. All right, so let's go ahead and end that one. I know it's short. Sometimes it would be great to be a Pentecostal. We could just be here all night, you know? But that's just not where we are. Now, tell me what you felt in the difference between those two tools. Tell me what you felt. Mm-hmm. Being heard. Yep. Very nice. And then speaker listener technique. The first one, meaning like last night. That's what he's talking about. I think. That one. Yeah. Yeah, you like having the floor? Yeah. No, thanks for saying that. Because everyone in this room needs time to have the floor. Everybody. We become brats when we always have it. That's when it's unhealthy. But we need it. Everyone needs it. You need to be able to speak, and you need to be able to be heard. And you need to be able to know that you both can do that. Yeah, that's good stuff. Such good stuff, man. Do you need me to tell you how to solve a problem? You're adults. Do you need your husband or wife to tell you how to solve a problem? Most probably not. What do you need? Okay, that's good. That's a foundation, right? What do you need from each other? Validation, which in order to have validation, you got to be heard, don't you? That's what you need in your marriage. You guys don't need to solve each other's problems. You're grown adults. You're grown-ups. And then most likely, most of you have first world problems. You know what first world problems are? I forgot to charge my cell phone today. You know what third world problems are? I don't know where my next meal's coming from. We live in a first world, blessed by God country. A flat tire is not really a problem. You don't need each other to solve each other's problems. You need to be heard by each other. You need to understand each other. That's what you need. And the freedom and the safety to speak. That's what you need. I'm way over time. And I could go on all day, and I hope you know that by now. On the back, there are 3 pieces of paper. One is the rules for the speaker-listener technique. I think that's what you printed out, Jeremiah? Jeremiah did that. Take home this emotional, Jeremiah printed these out too. Emptying the emotional jug. Please take these 2 pieces of paper home and put them on your refrigerator. The more you do this, the easier it will get. And when this becomes a part of who you are, you'll grow closer together. Okay, you will. You can't not if you're honest. So please take these home. Jeremiah asked me, how often should we do this? I think at least weekly. But here's what I'm also going to tell you. Here's maybe a little more practical. What's wrong with someone coming through the door and you see someone's off and you go, what are you mad about? Do you have the courage to ask that? Or do you always think it's you? It might not be you. But when you think it's you, you don't grow closer together. You protect yourself. That's not vulnerability. That's you standing on the hill saying you're not coming up here. What's wrong with asking each other, what are you happy about today? Not, is there anything good about your day? That sucks. That's a stupid question. What are you happy about today? Right? That's a lot more penetrating, isn't it? What are you afraid of? Is there anything you're afraid of lately? That's a little more practical. And for those of you that don't want to say it, or you find yourself not really knowing each other after a while, maybe every day or maybe a couple times a week, you can just text one of these messages to each other. That's how we can use technology in our favor, right? Just try it. Again, the more you practice it, the easier it gets, the more natural it gets. Okay? There are 2 other pieces of paper back here, and this is for Friday night, date night. This was my wife's idea. You can blame this on her. There is something here from a company called Prepare Enrich. This is an assessment of your marriage. Take 2 of them, okay, and do them individually. Bring them together and talk about them. And then use the speaker-listener technique to talk about them. And you'll see what I'm saying. Go back, watch the YouTube video if you need a review. One of these, you have to rate strength area or growth area. Conflict resolution. Well, that's a growth area. So what I hear you saying is that conflict resolution is a growth area for our marriage. Did I get that right? Oh yeah, I think that's right. That's speaker-listener technique. No fixing, no rebuttals, no nothing. You just heard it. This one, I love this topic. I love the topic of forgiveness in marriage. I don't even have time to touch it. But this is an apology language survey. I really encourage you to take this, and you have an explanation of it on the additional handout. It's a great survey to take. It's from the guy that did 5 love languages. It's going to feel very similar. This is your apology language. What are you comfortable with, right? That'll help you understand each other. I have enough material for multiple days. So again, you ask Jeremiah if you want me to come back, and we'll do this, and we'll work up a sweat doing it too. So thank you for listening to me. Thank you.
Give it up for Brady. Amazing stuff. Amazing stuff. I wrote a couple notes here. I know we're going to head out, but we learned this from our parents. So this is an opportunity, guys, that we can break that cycle. A lot of times, I said at the beginning, this flows downward as the children, our children, see what we are doing, see what we're about. And it's you. Sorry. But the children, they see what this is about. And the great thing about that, guys, is that we have the opportunity to break that cycle, see how we can manage conflict, how we can support and love one another. When you're married, you're supposed to be on the same team. And the one thing that Brady kind of embodied throughout this is believing the best. Believing the best is a great mentality to have in your marriage. It's always giving your partner the benefit of the doubt. Never making it about yourself. Always knowing that, you know what, if they're angry, like you said, ask that question no matter what. Knowing that whether it maybe you or not, just always believing the best. And that way you can support your spouse and you'll see fruit from that. Are you guys hungry enough? Are you guys for Jesus to have that fruit in your marriage, to have that love and grace in your marriage to pass along to future generations? I am. So I'm excited the thing is, this is 2 days. Now the work is on you. You came, you listened, that's great. You sat, got fed. Now you're fat and happy. Now it's time to put it to work. And like you said, it takes work in marriage. And with that comes beautiful, beautiful things. So let me pray. And like Brady said, we'll be on the lookout for a marriage retreat. And then don't forget to pick up those flyers in the back. 2 of the assessments, 1 of the apology language, and then also the rule book. If you guys need any the other resources, please reach out to me or Brady. Let me pray. Father God, thank you so much for this opportunity that we can just learn and grow and strengthen our marriages so that we can impact our families and our community, Lord. So, Lord, I pray that you just convict us, give us this fire to get uncomfortable, to get awkward, to look our spouse in the eye and just love them as you love the church, Lord, and as the church loves you, God, and we can have this beauty of representing what we're created to be and at what you created marriage to be. So, Lord, we give it to you. We give Friday to you, God, like this, the date night, God, that you would just break down walls, break down barriers, and allow our marriages to be renewed and restored. In Jesus' name, I pray. Amen.
Amen.
Awesome, guys. Have a great date night Friday. There are some leftovers, a couple brownies. And thank you, guys. Brady's in the back, so if you want to talk to him, he is here to chat. Same time as Friday. Yes. I would 5:45? Do you know? I am actually following that one. Oh, Kyle said 5:45, so I trust Kyle. He's an upstanding guy. And the kids are being fed. So, pizza. So if you count that as food, they're being fed. Thank you guys for joining us. See you at church.